Kuwait primarily. I think there's a tinge of Saudi Arabia there, but that's mostly Kuwait. What that is actually, this is from the Gulf War. So on the side of each turret, you'll see that same graphic. We've got 2 stars in the boundary there. Those indicate the 3 different places we fired on during the desert, during the Gulf War with our big guns, during Desert Storm specifically. 3 rounds underneath mean all 3 guns were fired from the turret, and the number of rounds we fired from said turret, or estimated anyway. I don't think it's exact. But overall, we fired around 800 rounds during Desert Storm. The idea was part of a diversionary tactic to make the Iraqis think we're invading from sea by covering for a sea invasion. It wasn't actually going to happen. The army was actually pushing it through the north and repelled them out that way. So it was actually pulling away frontline defensemen. So it was a pretty effective tactic. That operation only took a matter of days. You'll see a lot of remnants from the Gulf War just around the ship. Another good example is actually behind us. This is big box on the superstructure. You might notice there are 4 Tomahawks painted on outside of it. That means we fired 4 Tomahawks from that particular armored box launcher during the Gulf War. So that's an armored box launcher. It opens up like a clamshell and one on 2 from the inside. So it's a Tomahawk painted regionally fired. So folks, here we are back on the more interesting parts of the ship called the Kamikaze deck. Called that because the Kamikaze plane hit us. The interesting part about that story is not the plane hitting, it's what happened after. So I want to give you guys a little bit of background information on it first. So folks, does anyone here happen to know what the word kamikaze means, what it translates to?
Suicide.
I've heard suicide a lot. I've also heard crazy, hero, no fear, strong drinking out vacation. As it turns out, it actually means what I think I just heard behind me, divine wind. The reason it means divine wind is because, as it turns out, this word is not from World War II. It's actually a little bit older. It comes in the 13th century. Now, back in the 13th century, Japan was nearly invaded by the Mongolians on 2 different occasions, namely the forces of Kublai Khan. Now, Kublai Khan brought his Mongolian forces to invade the Japanese the first time. He'd land there, fight them for a little bit, but then a typhoon came and wiped out most of his forces, so he returned to Mongolia. I wasn't going to let a single freak accident in the weather stop him, so he started putting his troops back together, and 7 years later, come back with a much bigger invasion fleet. Wouldn't even make it there this time. A typhoon wiped him out before he landed. So he returned to Mongolia and decided, well, once was an accident, 2 is a pattern. I'm not going back. He gave up on it. The Japanese were pretty happy with this, so they named the typhoons the kamikaze, or literally divine wind, because they saw this as divine intervention that has saved them from invasion. You can see the word pop up again in World War II, but not really in the same way this time. Obviously, this would have been a little bit different. This would have been the Allied nickname, what the Japanese called Togotai, Special Attack Squadron. These would be young men, primarily under the age of 21. That way they wouldn't risk experienced pilots and it would be a suicide mission. Put a 500-pound bomb on the bottom of their plane and have them crash into an Allied ship, hoping to sink or at least to disable it, and of course killing themselves in the process. That was a desperate move, only really done at the end of the war. Towards the end of the war, the Japanese start realizing they're not going to build ships as quickly as the Allies. Eventually, they need a more efficient way of destroying Allied warships, or they'll be invaded. This is their more efficient way. Trade 1 plane for 1 warship, and although it was a pretty desperate move, it's a pretty devastating and effective move. Admiral Nimitz himself would even be quoted saying it was the only weapon he truly feared. We saw this tactic mostly in the Okinawa campaign. That's where the Japanese were most desperate. It's the last big battle of the Pacific. It's where this ship would be struck by 2 kamikaze aircraft within minutes of each other. The second plane that hit us, though, killed no one and caused minimal damage. So I'm only going to talk about the first plane that hit us. April 11th, 1945. A kamikaze plane is spotted low on the starboard side of the ship over here. He comes in real low and real close to the waterline in order to avoid anti-air gunfire. He's struck a couple times as he comes in, but he manages to pull up. And his left wing flips us over here, right by these 2 mooring goods with green triangles on. He hits us right at the top of the hull and then he bounces off. His nose is smashed into us a few frames down, but the bomb he was carrying did not detonate. The bomb and most of the plane bounced harmlessly off the side of the ship and fell back in the water. At the right wing of the plane, the cockpit and a couple of other sorted bits would snap off, and it would fly down the deck. This caused a big problem. Namely, the right wing would spread aviation fuel and spark a large fire taller than the mast of Missouri. Large enough ships around us thought we were sinking. Despite the massive fire, damage control would come out and they'd have it contained in only about 3.5 minutes. There wasn't a soul lost. In fact, there weren't even any major injuries, just minor scrapes and bruises. The crew of the Missouri is very lucky and very happy, so they start tossing everything overboard, cleaning out the ship, getting ready for the long battle ahead. Then they find the body of the Japanese pilot. Understandably angry at him, he has just tried to kill them, so they think it best just toss him overboard with this plane. They need permission from the captain, so they call up to their captain, Captain Callahan. They say, "Sir, we found the body of the Japanese pilot, permission to throw him overboard." Callahan had lost his brother to the Japanese on the war not long before this point. It's kind of a personal issue to him. So the crew is surprised to hear that his response would be absolutely not. Take that young man below. You're going to dress him for a military burial with full honors. The crew of the Missouri wasn't necessarily happy to hear this, but they were going to do it because their captain just gave them an order. And they're not questioning it. They definitely don't expect their captain to explain himself. Callahan, however, interesting man that he was, would explain himself anyway. He came out of the intercom system of the ship and he'd tell his men a dead enemy is no longer our enemy. This young man died believing he was defending his country. Same thing I'd expect out of any of you. He deserves a burial at sea. So the young man would be brought below, wrapped in a makeshift Japanese flag made out of a white bedsheet and red signal flags, and then on the following morning, April 12, 1945, he'd be laid to rest over the side of the ship, given a proper burial at sea. This interesting little bit of humanity is usually lost to history because on April 12, 1945, that same morning, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States, had passed away. Due to the unfortunate timing, people don't normally learn about this event. It wasn't forgotten by the crew of the Missouri, and it wasn't forgotten by those of us here at the Missouri Memorial Association, and I certainly hope it isn't forgotten by any of you. I'll tell you two people who definitely didn't forget about it. We had two veterans a little while ago come and hear the story. They became so intrigued, they wanted to know who the pilot was. So they'd spent 7 years of research in Japan, until eventually coming to the conclusion that the pilot was most likely Petty Officer 2nd Class Setsuo Ishino. He was only 19, he was only my age when he struck the ship. And the youngest kamikaze pilot we have on record would only have been about 14. What's tragic as that is to think about, I want to bring up a quote from the Ishino family, who actually came and visited in 2001. They wanted to thank the Callahan family for taking such good care of their son during such a difficult time. They said, "Isn't it amazing that you could see humanity at its best and humanity at its worst in only 24 hours? Totally. Now this does conclude the end of our tour. So I want to thank you very much for coming. Give some quick instructions on where you might want to go next. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about that